So was around sometime in 2015 when one of my friends was going to North Carolina for at least a week. Now, at the time of this story, I'll call him by the name Noah. Noah was with his brother named Darren, and they were both 14 and 17. Noah was 17 while Darren was 14. They were staying at their grandparents in North Carolina for a few days, and they lived not far from a very big forest where lots of people go hiking and stuff. Now, Noah and Darren decided to go venture through the forest one day as they didn't really have anything going on. With their parents who happened to go out to do some stuff, and the grandparents were home. While the parents were out, Darren had asked, as well as Noah, if they could travel through the forest. Of course they were okay with it, but they had certain rules, is to be back at a certain time and don't be out all night. Well, all day is what they say, but not into the night. So, Noah, along with Darren, ended up going through a path in the forest. While they were in the path going through the forest, they ended up taking a few photos of some wildlife, even some cool plants that they didn't get from where they were living at. It wasn't until when Noah and Darren came across what seemed to be an old cabin. The cabin looked overgrown as it hadn't been used in a few years. So Darren and Noah thought that maybe it was just some people who used to live in that cabin, but unfortunately it's not there anymore. It was still there, but what I mean by not there anymore is just the fact that it hadn't been used in a while. Noah, along with Darren, headed down towards the cabin where they could see moss growing on the roof. There was even broken glass on where the windows were to be, and there was even some graffiti on the old and rotten wood. They looked inside through the window to think that maybe somebody could be there just to see if they can scare them. However, it looked really dusty and there was maybe a few old furniture, but it most likely hadn't been used in years. Now, just as they were looking around, Noah unfortunately heard a snap. He looked and he saw that there was someone watching in the woods. It looked to be about a man, maybe about nearly 6 feet tall, and he looked like he had an axe with him. And clothing apparel was wearing some cargo pants, and he looked like he was wearing a ski mask. Noah and Darren ended up looking over to see that this man looked like he had been there for at least a day or two. Now, they ended up turning around and running out of that cabin area as fast as they could, with the man chasing after them. After being chased for what seemed like a while, they reached to the civilization where they ended up running to a nearest house, trying to call somebody and ask them for help. Of course, they looked to see that the man had not followed them, but of course, they were lectured by their parents that they had to be more careful with their surroundings when their parents had returned. But the main thing was that both of the boys were okay. It is unclear of what this man really wanted in the forest, but Darren and Noah don't plan to return to that abandoned cabin in the woods to find out. They even wonder, was that man planning to lure them into the cabin so he can surprise attack them? There is no update or anything regarding if that man was still out there or not, but Noah and Darren would like to think that they are not there anymore, but of course, they really don't know if that man is still out there somewhere. This happened to one of my dad and my parents' friends. His name was Bud, and he used to go hunting pretty much anytime. Mostly he does fishing and hiking, but he does hunting when hunting season was going on. However, one of these times was definitely one of the most questionable things that he's ever came across. Now, the town or the city that Bud lives at is not really the best or the safest, and sirens would often be heard a few times a week. Now, Bud was going hiking when in the forest, and of course his girlfriend was taking his daughter to school, so he left at that time. While Bud was out hunting, he ended up seeing a couple of nice picnic spots that some people would often have picnics and stuff. He eventually came across what seemed to be a little small fishing hole where some people like to go fishing, and there was even a couple lookout towers he saw that some people like to do hunting at. However, as Bud was reminiscing all the stuff he was seeing during his hike, he ended up seeing what appeared to be a black garbage bag. Now, to be fair, a lot of people like to dump their garbage around this forest, so it wasn't common to see that. However, this is when Bud ended up deciding to get a bit closer to see if there was really garbage or something suspicious. In fact, it didn't look like anything much. But this is definitely really something that really got a little unnerved for, Bud. Bud ended up approaching the garbage bag, thinking that maybe somebody was actually there. But, however, he ended up getting closer to hear that there was a foul odor. In fact, this foul odor, it sounded like and smelled like there really was pretty much a body. The foul odor smelled like someone had been dead for at least almost a day or two. However, when he got closer, he ended up seeing that there was a man. Of course, the man's body, it looked like he had been dead for a day or two. Of course, Bud ended up reporting this to the park ranger and the authorities, and they gathered the bag as evidence. It was later revealed that Bud, that one of the guys had been missing for a few days in the forest, and it appeared that he had been dumped. Since he was in a garbage bag, it was most likely the conclusion that there might have been a murderer. However, they search and rescue people and even police had searched the area, but they couldn't find anyone responsible. So Bud never went hiking alone since then, and he always goes with his friends or his girlfriend and his kid. Still to this day, Bud ever wonders, how could this man died? That was the biggest mystery that he has yet to solve. For some context, this happened back in the summer of 2021, and this took place sometime near the end of June. Canada Day was approaching within a few days at the time, so I decided to do a trail ride before the holiday. I won't say the name of the barn for privacy reasons, but it was a horse riding stable that does trail rides during the summer and fall months. I decided to do a 2-hour ride, which involves crossing a road, rocky terrain, etc. It wasn't a big deal though, seeing that I'm a very experienced rider and that I have been around horses for years, you can say. When I got to the barn, I was on a Palomino gelding named Piper. Piper was very calm and an easygoing gelding, not stubborn like the other geldings I have rode in the past, but he was very responsive to commands. My trail guide, which we'll call her Miranda, was with me during this event. I have been on a few horse trails, did experience some creepy weird stuff, but this takes the cake. When Miranda got on her horse, she was in front of me as she knew the trail very well, and has done them for numbers of years. As we were getting on the trail, we got into some dense forest after crossing a road to a big trail that led into the forest. As soon as we were in the forest, Piper's ears were forward as he was alert or something. It was common for horses to move their ears like that, as I was used to their body language, like ears pinned back, meaning they're angry, biting, kicking, etc. I have been reading about horses since I was in elementary school, so I have learned knowledge about horses. Fast forward to about 20 minutes into the trail, Miranda and I climbed a steep and rocky hill that wasn't hard. Seeing that I have done it before, it didn't seem to be much of a problem. When we reached the top of the hill, we stopped to allow our horses to catch their breaths, and as we looked around the surroundings, I noticed that on my left side there was a figure. Now I couldn't see it very clearly, but it looked like someone was walking through the trees. Miranda did say that other people hike on trails as well, so I thought that was the case. As soon as we got on our horses to start walking forward, I looked to my left to see a black figure was moving around the same pace as we are. Now this was getting weird, as I have no idea what the figure was or what it was doing there. As soon as we got to a big open field on the ground, Piper looked to the left when we heard some twigs snap along with some leaves crunching on the ground. I could see that the figure was about 20 feet away from us, and Miranda called out if there was a hiker. However, when she called out to the figure, it didn't speak or say anything. Whatever it did, the figure ran off until it was out of sight. As we continued our trail ride, Miranda and I could see a campsite that looked like it was trashed. The tent was ripped, clothes and belongings were thrown all over the place. We were confused about what happened, but regardless, we continued on our ride. As we got back into the woods after crossing the open field, we could see some of the trees had markings on them. Some of them were painted in blue, others were painted in red, and we were even more confused as to why that was the case. We continued to get down the trail, but as we got closer, something nearly made the horses spook. The figure I saw earlier was 15 feet away when it ran across the trail. As it ran across the trail, it let out a gargling scream. It sounded like a woman, and I was confused as to why she was screaming. We got our horses to trot to go after the woman, but as we got to where the woman turned, she was gone. The scream of that woman sounded like if she was no older than 30, and I had no idea why she disappeared. Piper then looked to the right to see a sign, and the wood was rotting in the sign, so I knew that the sign was old. Miranda and I decided to go check out the sign, but as we did, there was an arrow with some wood that was blurred off. I didn't even know what the sign said or what it was saying, so we headed in that direction. As we kept walking, I looked at the trees to see some skulls were nailed onto the wall. Most of them were birds to human skulls, and this made me almost sick. We kept going down the path until we could see a wooden structure in the distance, and it looked like an old cabin. The cabin looked like as if it was abandoned for years, so we headed off in that direction. When we got to the cabin in the clearing, we saw a lot of bones from animals and even human bones as well. We could see that the cabin looked like it had been burnt down by a fire due to the damage-wise, but we weren't sure on how recent the fire was. Miranda and I could then see some writing on the wooden planks and that they were nailed onto the trees. They were all related to death and Satan. Whoever made this must be some cult in the area. But the only problem was the fact that there was no one was around. When I started to hear some voices suddenly, and it sounded like ghostly voices. It sounded paranormal, like, "Get out of here, burn the witch." I thought in my mind was playing tricks on me, and that was when I heard the sound of a woman crying. I thought it was the same woman who we saw on the trail earlier, and we saw the woman we spotted earlier on the trail. As we looked up at her, she had long, messy black hair with brown eyes, was dressed as if she was in a Halloween costume, but she didn't have anyone with her, so that made me wonder, was she really alone? Whatever happened next really made us get the fuck out of there. The woman let out a wicked cackle and then let out a scream of terror. Piper started to back up and turn around before galloping off. Miranda and her horse followed us out of that area. We didn't stop galloping until we got far away from that place. Piper eventually calmed down within 15 minutes. As soon as we were safe, Miranda and I were quiet for the rest of the trail ride and didn't speak a word about it. As soon as we got back to the barn, we let the owner know of the woman we saw, and after we explained what happened, The owner decided not to call the authorities about what we saw. Plus, if we even did get the authorities involved, it would be very hard to track her down since she was in the forest. And plus, with her being in the forest, it would be impossible to find her or the spot that is run by maybe a cult or something. I always thought witches were scary, that only existed in stories and movies. But after this experience, I really don't know what to think. A part of me says that it is real, and another part of me is saying that it was paranormal.